Now that we have our model and endpoint ready, we can start run prediction against them. So next thing to do would be to include the new AgilePoint SageMaker extender within the college enrollment process so we can start consume prediction throughout the life cycle of this process and adapt the process flow accordingly. To start work with the AgilePoint SageMaker extender, we first need to create an access token for AWS. An access token can be either created on the application level, in which case it will be only privately available for the application in which it was created, or we can create it on a global level under the Managed Center Global Access Token and provide permission for other developers to reuse this access token across different applications within the same environment. So I'm going to go ahead into the Managed Center Global Access Token and we'll create a token as a global access token by clicking on a token and then look for Amazon. I'm going to select AWS, click next, provide it with a name, AWS. I'm going to use AWS SageMaker demo. And as you can see, we need now to provide an access key ID and a secret key. Those needs to be held from AWS console. So I'm going to go into the console. I'm already under the IAM/users. And as you can see, we have 2 users in here. I'm going to use the demo user and drill into it. And once in, I'm going to go ahead into security credentials and create a new access key. So just click on the create access key and you'll be generated with the new access key. If you already have one, you can definitely use this one, but in my case, I need to create. So once created, you will receive the access key ID. So copy this and paste it back into the AgilePoint access token. And now let's take the secret. Now keep in mind that once you show, you can copy this and you can, once you close, that's it. That would be the last one that you can see and show the access secret key on the AWS console. Know that you do have the option to download a CSV file with this information, but if you do so, make sure to store it securely within a safe, or just make sure that your access key and secret key are stored safely within some kind of password manager or safe. So I'm going to use the secret key and paste it into my access token. And now the last thing to do would be to select a region. So for me, this would be Europe, Frankfurt. Note that this should be the region where you deployed your endpoint. And I'm going to click on test connection. My connection is successful and I'm good to go. So I have the access token ready and now I'm good to go into my process model and see what we have in here. So the first thing to note is that the Amazon SageMaker extender can be found under the machine learning activity library. And you'll see that there's 2 other extenders in here for machine learning. One is for the Azure machine learning. The second one is for the Amazon machine learning, the old service by Amazon for machine learning. And now we've been added with software update 2, we've been added with the Amazon SageMaker. And for the interest of time, I already placed it on the model and we'll quickly review this in a minute, but let's first see what we have on the process itself. So as you can see, this is a college enrollment process just for the sake of this demo. Relatively simple and sequential type of flow. We have a student applying for enrollment to an academic year. Once he will apply, he will be open with a form and will provide some information about what course, what year, some background about his academic achievements, some information about his family and so on. And once submitted, this the process will start to flow and go into the head of department first to review and approve. If approved, this will be heading into the dean approval to review and approve, and if approved, eventually the student application will be eligible to enroll and will be enlisted within the approved student list. In the case of either head of department rejected or the dean rejected, then in this case the application will be rejected and the student will be enlisted within the rejected list. So this is our flow, and as you can see, again, it's quite sequential and simple. Now, first thing to note about the extender and first thing to understand about an extender is that it's not an activity. As you can see, it's not part of our flow. Extender is basically just an event listener. It just sits on top of our model and floating on top of it and listen or subscribe to specific events that will occur throughout the life cycle of this model. And once this event will be raised, then he will kick in and take his action. So let's see how we can configure the extender to wait for a specific event and what action he can take. So inside an extender, we can see that first we have the option to add more than just one model. I already have one for the college enrollment model we deployed, and I'm going to focus on it. And you can see that first thing is that we need to provide the Amazon SageMaker access token, and I have already selected the SageMaker demo access token we just created. Once an access token will be selected, you will be populated by endpoints available on this Amazon tenant. So I have this college enrollment model, the one that we deployed together, selected. And we have some additional fields in here: target container hostname and target model. Those are optional. In the case of this endpoint is a multi-container or a multi-model, then you may need those two. But in our case, it's not. There's no need for this. And again, those are optional. And that's for the configuration on the AWS itself, or with regards to the AWS endpoint we have. Now, we have the activity to select and then an event. So by this, we can tell or configure this extender to listen and subscribe for the leave activity instance event of this activity, student enrollment, which is the first activity. So when the event of leave activity will happen, then this extender will kick in and will invoke an inference request against this endpoint. So basically, it will just invoke a prediction request against this endpoint to try and get a prediction. And the request is of type CSV because that's the type of the endpoint we have. And let's take a look on the mapping we have. So we can see the different columns or the different inputs this model is expecting. Now, this needs to fully match the training data set that we provided in order to train the model. So we have all the different columns we provided in the training data set, and it needs to fully match both the order of the columns that we had on the training data set, as well as the number of the columns that we have on the training data set. This is important. Make sure that the order and the number are matching, with one note that, of course, on the training data set, we also had the eligible yes or no column at the end. This is just for the sake of the training. In this case, when we invoke inference against this model, then we do not provide the eligibility itself. So this would actually have one column less. And once provided the columns, then we just provide the values from our application, just drag and drop the related fields from my application to the column value. And that's basically it in terms of the request. Now, when the model will have the prediction, we will get the response back, and we can see how we mapped the response. So the model will return a label and a probability, and those are mapped into a corresponding field within my application. So label is mapped into a field called eligibility, and the probability is mapped into a field called not eligible score. Now, it's mapped into a not eligible score because eventually the model, he will always try to predict whether this, the probability predicts is for this, for the student to be not eligible. So the score we get in the probability that we get is always for not being eligible. But obviously based on this, we can understand whether it's not eligible or eligible. What's the probability for this to be eligible or not? Okay, the label will tell whether it's yes or no, and the probability will tell what's the probability for this to be yes or to be no, although it will always refer to the no. So now we have the response and the request. We also have the additional actions. And in the additional actions, we can check this one to change flow. And when we check this one, then we need to configure the condition, how we are changing the flow. And I have the first rule, which is eligible. And in case of this is eligible student, then just jump directly to the Dean approval. Okay, and we can click on this and take a look on the condition we have in here. And the condition and the structure of this is quite similar, and as you probably already know from the condition builder, condition activity, sorry. And we have a condition or expression saying that if the eligibility is equal to yes and the not eligible score is lower or equal to 0.1 or actually 10%, then it's a high probability for this to be eligible. If not eligible is lower or equal to 10%, it means that the probability for this user to be eligible is 90% or more. Okay, so that's the expression in order to, or the condition, the business rule, in order to verify this is eligible. And again, in the case of this evaluates to true, then we will head into the Dean approval. The second condition we have is not eligible. And if it's not eligible, then we will directly head into the rejection notice after the head of department. And let's have a look on the expression we have in here. So if the eligibility is equal to no and not eligible score is greater or equal 0.6, which basically means 60%, then that's a high probability for this user to be not eligible. And in that case, again, we will just reject the application and directly head into the rejection notice after the head of approval. And from that point on, the flow will just keep its own path. And lastly, the else, if it does not fall within less than 0.1 or greater or equal to 0.6, this is basically the gray area. So if it's falling within the gray area, or it doesn't just fall within any of these rules, then basically we are going to let the model do its own flow. So we are not going to interfere with this model. We are not going to adapt it. We're just going to leave it drive, keep its own flow and path. and have the head of department take his decision, and accordingly dean approval will take its decision, or and so on and so forth. So that's the configuration of the extender. So let's finish this one and now save and check it and publish. So now we have this published, and I'm gonna head into my work center and my apps and fire a new college enrollment application. So this will fire up the start form of this application. And again, there's different fields we need to provide, and for the interest of time, I have some list with all this, with all the information, and the form we just populate the information from this list to save us the time to type in the different information for the different fields. But we can see we have a student named John Smith. He's applying for the course of PCME for the semester 3 and so on. And let's take a look on his academic achievements. So on the 10th class he had a grade of A, on the 12th class he had a grade of B, which are good grades. And again, keep in mind those are high dominating inputs for the model to take his decision whether eligible or not. And let's take a look on the next family history. So from here we need to know that the family income is quite decent, and again that's another high dominating field within the decision of the model to apply, to identify this student as eligible or not. So at this point, let's just click on the submit and see how this will work in flow. So I have one task for the dean approval, so that's a good sign. Then we can open the process viewer and we can see that indeed we had the user applied his request. It started to head into the head of department, but at this point the extender kicked in. He identified the leave activity instance of this student enrollment, went ahead into SageMaker, had a prediction, and identified that this student is with a high probability to be enrolled, and for that reason he adapted this process model and skipped the process directly into the dean approval. So no need to wait for the head of department. We're just heading directly into the dean approval. And let's open up the dean approval form, see what we have in his form. And that's what I wanted to see. So again, this is a high probability user to be enrolled, so it's eligible for admission, and it has the probability for 99.97% to be eligible for admission. So I'm gonna, as a dean now, I'm gonna provide and approve and submit, and we have this now. This student will now be enlisted within the approved student list. So that's one use case. Let's go ahead into my application and click on the college enrollment again, fire up another start form and apply for another student. This time this would be a student, I think I have this one, Shane Warren. So this student should be with lower academic achievements, so he's applying for the PCM course on the spring semester. Let's click on the next, and again, his academic achievements are not that great. He has E on 10th class and a B on the 12th class. And the family income is not that great to cover on the relatively low academic achievement. So again, keep in mind the grade in 10th class, 12th class, and the family income are three of them are high dominating inputs to control the decision of or the eligibility for the student. On the model decide on the eligibility of the student. So let's just submit this request and see how does it flow. So let's open the process model viewer, and as we can see, again, the extender identified the event of the live activity instance for the student, and he got a prediction and identified this is again high probability for not eligible user, and for that sake he has adapted the process model and just directly moved it from into the rejection notice after the head of approval. And from that point on, he just took the rejection path, which enlisted this student within the rejected student list and head into the completion of this process. So with that said, that will conclude the demo of the new Amazon AgilePoint SageMaker extender for AWS machine learning. And again, AgilePoint is a perfect fit to be leveraged by machine learning, both for many reasons, but among them, for one, all the information is being audited with high quality, which can generate a high quality training feed for machine learning to build smart and accurate models. And on the other hand, due to the runtime dynamic process execution model, AgilePoint has always been able to adapt process throughout their life cycle through the runtime. And again, using with machine learning, this means that we can dynamically adapt based on machine learning and decisions or predictions to make the process much more efficient and do more with less eventually. So that will conclude our journey with the SageMaker, the new integration within Software Update 2. Hope this was insightful for you, and keep tuned for more to come.